Hello, and welcome to the Magic of Games podcast, the podcast celebrating games for the magical experiences they immerse us in and unraveling their inner workings. Whether you are a game developer, or player, or both, the only thing you need to fully appreciate this podcast is a love for games, which, if you're listening, then you surely do already. This podcast is recorded live every Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time, soon to be 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time as this goes live. All of this happens on our Twitch and YouTube channels, linked down below. If you want to get a glimpse into the thought that goes into the gameplay experiences live, and maybe even ask your own questions, why don't you swing on by? This week's guest is Daniel. He's one of the 3 developers at Romantic Games, a studio composed of 3 brother developers, if that makes sense. He and his 2 other brothers are now working on Folklands, a city builder where you build a new home for a fledgling colony of Nordic culture-inspired settlers. You must carefully plan your supply lines, tend to their social needs, and more to build yourself a colony and transform it into a prosperous settlement. He and I talked about the story of how Folklands came from a simple card game to a fully fledged city builder, how your little folks navigate the world using math, and the importance of laying out a foundational vision early on to manage development time and not get overwhelmed, or as we call it, scope creep. But enough about me. Before you put us on in the background, hold on, make sure to drop us a like and maybe even a subscribe. That would be really appreciated. But without further delay, let's get right into our debut episode of the Magic of Games.
Yeah, so why don't, for our audience, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. I'm Daniel. I'm one of the 3 brothers from Romantic Games. We're making the game Folklands right now. We've also made a card game previously over a span of approximately 10 years before we all realized neither of us liked card games. So this is the new game that we actually all like to play and make.
Alrighty. So with the card game, what exactly led you guys to figure out, like, oh, we don't like this, and like pivot towards Folklands specifically?
Yeah, so the thing is, one of the brothers, he's had this kind of story universe thing that he's made from when he was fairly young, and at some point we pitched the idea to each other. Maybe we should kind of make a game in this universe, because he wanted to make a movie with lore and like everything, but making a movie is expensive, time-consuming stuff. So making a game is obviously not time-consuming at all. That's a much better idea.
Totally not.
Yeah. So we made a card game in that universe with the factions and the creatures and the art and everything. And then it kind of just dragged along. Kind of just took a while to make, and we all, even though we kind of enjoyed playing it with each other, never really clicked. And then at some point we just got to the point where we asked each other, do you like to play card games? And neither of us actually did. So the Folklands actually started as a strategy game in the same universe. So it's not super obvious yet, but there is more coming from that, and you'll see it in the art update for when we go to early access.
Yeah, when I was playing it, I definitely saw like the idea of borders and expanding those borders. I'm like, ooh, I feel like there's gonna be some competitive element against like other settlements and all that stuff.
Yeah, you're right, and it's based on, like, if you look at the old Settlers games, like Settlers 2, 3, and 4, where you have border control and expansion as part of the core game mechanic, and even border dispute and territory control as like the core game mechanic. That's something we wanted to remake, and when we're playing multiplayer, the settlement areas and getting to the good stuff, that's going to be crucial.
Yeah, awesome, dude. Well, I want to talk about some of the game design magic that goes into it. I want to ask you. So, talk to me about all this, like your vision that specifically went into Folklands, transitioning from your card game into this, and like what experience did you want players to have, and they want to immerse themselves in within Folklands?
Mm-hmm. The card game wasn't. It just wasn't the thing we wanted to make. But then we had this universe, and we've always liked the kind of not super fast-paced. If you look at StarCraft and Age of Empires, it's kind of more towards the fast-paced end of the scale. But we liked the kind of base building. Like if you've played Strongholds, like it's the slow build, and it's same with Settlers and Anno. The Anno games, I think you mentioned the Anno on your stream as well. It's more of a slow experience, even though there's always things to do, right? But we don't want to rush you into kind of having to build armies, having to build combat units. It's more about figuring out what's the area like, what are the resources like. It's like the exploration bit in Civilization and the exploration bit in Anno, like when you land on a new island or something. We want you to kind of have that peaceful, calm experience, but at the same time we want you to discover new things around the area constantly. And at the same time, it's the resource chain mechanic in both Settlers and Anno. That's most of the kind of old school strategy games, they have this resource chain build up, and we tried to introduce you to that gradually, and you kind of saw that with the tools that you were lacking when you were playing. It isn't introduced in the tutorial that early, but we're introducing it later in the tutorial as well. But it's this whole constantly expanding and building out and catering for new needs. Like, yeah, we want you to have that. So always more things to do.
So then, why exactly that like slow experience? Why? So people would, I would say to you, like, why exactly not design a like fast experience from all these others? Like, why don't you just get into like building that fast city? Like, boom. Like maybe like Sim City or something like that, where you're starting out with like you can just start building apartment complexes ASAP if you want. So why exactly the slower experience?
I think that just comes down to preference. Also, there are tons of games that already fill this need for a more fast-paced experience, and the same for the settlement builder games and the colony building games. If you've played Banished, for instance, it's a very slow, but it's also a very rewarding experience. So it's taking the time and not being rushed, and you can progress at your own pace. And we're all family people, so we have kids and we have family. So being able to kind of take it in our own pace, that's important to us, and the same thing for when you're playing it multiplayer as well. So you can set your own speed, and you can come back to it if you want to, and you don't have to be super focused for 1 hour and kind of rush it. But it's
so
supposed to be a rewarding and relaxing experience.
Okay, rewarding, relaxing. So sort of that family mentality that you just mentioned kind of informs like the gameplay design and choices. This is like Folklands is a game that's meant to be just like, hey, after a long day, you can just sit down and just play that. That's exactly the thing that you're going for.
Exactly, and the thing is, that's the thing we wanted to pick from the different games that we liked, where we liked parts of the game, but there's always this rush. Like at some point in the game, there's always this pressure to move in a direction that we didn't like, and then this is our way of trying to pick and choose from all those different games and getting the enjoyable and rewarding elements without the need to expand and rush when you don't want to.
Yeah. So
at the same time, we do. Yeah, we can probably talk about that later.
Yeah. Well, then, like, what games were you specifically pulling from?
The biggest inspirations are the games I've mentioned so far, like the early Anno games, 1503 and 1602. Like the still is isometric kind of Viewpoint, even the Venice like 14 something Anno games where you still have this. It's not super combat focused. There is a combat element to it, but you can kind of avoid it entirely if you don't want to. And then the same thing with the Settlers games, the Settlers 2, 3, and 4, where there's a focus on the roads and the distribution throughout your settlement. We played the Caesar games and Pharaoh games, which is it's kind of similar, where you have I don't know if you noticed, but you had the builder's hut in your settlement, where you have to take care of maintenance and you have to take care of fire safety and the taxation, like you probably saw a bit already in the game. So it's drawing from different bits and parts of those 3 game series mainly. But then obviously we're taking inspirations from other games as well, but kind of those 3 are the main inspirations.
Awesome. And so, all right, so with like all of this like vision that you've laid out specifically, pulling from Pharaoh, Caesar, a little bit of the early Anno series, and like creating this like relaxing environment, there's you had all of these mechanics now all speaking to each other, but during your whole entire implementation of this and like developing of this, tell me about like the most nightmarish mechanic that you've had to develop so far. Like, what's been the most difficult thing to make, and how exactly have you been able to overcome it, if you haven't as of yet?
I think the thing that comes back to, I'll highlight 2 things. One of them is, it sounds stupid and it's kind of a very very basic thing to focus on when you're making a game, and it's the pathfinding. Like it's the why do people walk over there when I want them to walk over there instead? And this, like we kind of want to enforce this whole you need to have roads and everything throughout your settlement, but at the same time there's so many cases where you'll end up destroying a building and then suddenly there's 10 planks lying in the woods, and then you have 10 planks but they're lost and you can't really find them. And it's this whole it's not difficult, but it's at the same time it's a bit difficult to solve without breaking the core game mechanic of being dependent on roads. So that's kind of that's a thing that's constantly coming back to us. And the second thing is explaining the game mechanics in a way that I don't know, where it's supposed to make sense. So we want to have, like, not explaining the game mechanics, but kind of making the game mechanics make sense together with each other. Like there's one thing that we've constantly come back to, and that's the tax collector. Whenever we're introducing the game to new people, that's the point where people get thrown off. We kind of like we introduced the tax collector and the dependency on having enough coins as kind of slowing you down mechanics, so you wouldn't just plop down buildings everywhere, because that could kind of it takes away the ability for the game to focus on different buildings. Like if you're planning 10 houses and you plot them all down, then how do you kind of make sure the settlement expands at the same time as you want to have these 10 houses built? Because as you saw, there's a limit to how many resources you have, especially at the beginning. So that was introduced as kind of a trying to force you to progress at a certain pace. But that's something that we've received a lot of feedback on, so it's probably not going to stay that way.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. It's a bit all over the place. Probably not something one specific thing.
Yeah, I mean,
balancing is hard. That's the thing we learned in the card game as well. Imagine trying to balance all this against each other. It's finding a way for all these game mechanics that we like to work together in one game. It's that's probably probably the thing, if you want to.
So I mean,
but it's also fun. That's the thing I like about developing the game and playing and testing and seeing how a new idea works in the game. So it's fun and rewarding and challenging at the same time.
Yeah, that's good. So it's always the minutia that always throws you and I off. It's like, oh, what's the everyday? Like the best way I can, I don't know if you understand this, but you can, but like explain. Have you ever heard about the explain a peanut butter? Make me a peanut butter sandwich, peanut butter and jelly sandwich. When it comes to programming, and you never really
I have heard it, but I can't remember what it's about.
You have to actually explain. You just don't say like, oh, I grab a piece of bread. Like, no, you have to be like, okay, what kind of bread? Okay, now you have to open up the packaging, and then you have to slice it and grab a knife and blah blah blah. Like, you have to go through all the minutia. That's essentially, and the minutia. Some of our audience may not know like exactly what pathfinding is. Do you want to like explain it to them what pathfinding is in like game design and game programming?
Yep. So pathfinding is when you have, say, one of your folks, and they need to figure out how to get from where they're standing now and to the place where they want to be. Like, say you have a woodcutter or a transporter. He's supposed to pick up planks and then go to a building and deliver the planks. The pathfinding is figuring out how do I get to where the planks are. Where are planks? Like, you have to know where in the settlement the planks are. There are rules for different occupations where they can go. Like, transporters can only go on roads. Woodcutters can go into the woods. Where there are no roads and chop down trees and carry them back. But the pathfinding is about the rules and the logic around figuring out where to go and how to get there and what's the most optimal route to get to where you want to go.
Okay, and so in some of the and like talk to me about like the challenges of the minutia in that like specific pathfinding. Like what issues did you encounter like when it came to the logic, and what have you found to be the best solution, some of the best design ideas that you've made for solving that?
So the most basic problem is figuring out the most optimal route to take. Like that's a fairly simple. There are some simple mathematical equations you can use, and there's some simple pathfinding logic you can use to determine the fastest and the most optimal route. But we had some issues where, because there are rules like you have to walk on roads. That's a simple rule, right? And then we try and make some roads for you when you plop down buildings, so you always have a road to where you want to go. But then maybe you remove that building, or maybe you remove something in between the building and where you want to go. And then suddenly, instead of having a path to where you want to go, suddenly you have to inspect a much bigger area to figure out where can I actually go. And when you do that for a lot of folks over and over, that can kind of it can be very taxing on the game as it runs. Especially if you kind of remove a central bit of your settlement or something, and then suddenly no one can find where they're going, but at the same time they need to find it. So they're struggling with that. Like that's the optimization bit. But then you have the logic bit where we have to tell the player why can't this person go to where they want to go. Like, to the game, it makes sense that if a plank is on a tile where there aren't any roads, to the game it makes sense that, okay, then that plank is off limits. You can't get to that plank. So logically, we can't include that plank in the pathfinding. But if that's the only plank you have, which can certainly be the case, especially early in the game, like you're running out of planks because that's a core building material. We have to tell you because you can probably see the plank lying on the ground. Why can't my folks pick it up? It's right there. So trying to explain that to the player in a way that makes sense, even though we're telling the player over and over, you have to build roads, like you saw that in the tutorial. Remember to build roads connecting these two buildings. Remember to build roads here. So we're telling the player that over and over, but still, when you're in the thick of it, when you need planks, it doesn't intuitively make sense when you look at it. Like, there's planks on the ground. Why can't I pick it up? Mm-hmm. So that's the that's just one example, but it's a typical example for how pathfinding needs to make sense in the world, but it also needs to make sense to the player when they're playing.
All right. And then, okay. And so, and then with that pathfinding, did you speak a lot of optimization in that? Was that like a certain factor in the rate of progression? Do you like intentionally stall the folks on the screen to be like, oh yeah, choose the sort of least optimized path right now, in order to balance out the progression and the pacing of the game?
No, we try and make sense of it. Like, we try and make sure they always choose the most optimal path, and we give the player tools to help them as well. One of the things I remember when I was playing Banished was there is your folks have energy, so they need to. You need to take into account the distance from where they work to where they live to where they pick up food, and the game will pick the most optimal person at the time when their occupation is assigned. But that can change. Like, if you're building 10 houses around your settlement, suddenly someone is now living much closer to a workplace and should have been placed at that workplace. So we're giving you the tools to see that information, and kind of shuffle it around if you see that it's not working as good as it should. But we try and be a bit pragmatic, so we pick the most optimal person and the most optimal distance at the time, and then it will probably balance out in the end. But if you want to try and min-max it and kind of super optimize the productivity of your settlement,
yeah,
you can look at that, and you can see the list of people in your settlement, and you can see who lives closest to this workplace, and then you can reassign them and kind of just switch them around, and then you can actually get a pretty big productivity boost that way. So it's yeah.
So so essentially, you want this to be a relaxing experience, but you going back to like the slow burning reward, it also rewards you for essentially micromanaging with that productivity boost of the people that you saw. Interesting.
Yeah.
So.
And you'll see that, like, it's early days still, and we're not showing you all the different elements that are happening in the background. But at the same time, we're trying to surface some of them. Like, you can see the productivity percentage when you're looking at a workplace, and you can see the tile distance from where people work to where they live and you can kind of see the distance they have to walk. But we're not exactly telling you how that all affects the productivity of, like, overall productivity of your settlement. But with the statistics that we're adding, you'll see much clearer when you're making when your changes are making an impact. Like, if you shuffle people around, you can probably see a notable, like a visible performance boost or productivity boost if you're looking at the overall graph.
Yeah, I mean, like, statistics and like numbers and all that communication is especially important. And like, do you ever find that it's like a very important thing, like, especially in strategy game, whereas like I coming from my experience with mine, it's like percentages. You go with the higher percentage, 75 and up, it's gonna hit. People just think it's gonna hit. So with that productive, so, but say for like the casual player of Folklands, does so, but if the game still finds that, how exactly does, and going back to optimization, how exactly have you guys like really tried to reward min-maxing without really messing up with the game design's pacing and balance, so to say?
Yeah, it comes back to the thing I mentioned briefly. It's we're for instance we're showing you the productivity percentage, so you can see the numbers. So you can we're showing you the overall production of each resource in your settlement, so you can see that going up or down. We're showing you the tile distance, like I said, from where you work to where you live, and the same thing if you look at a building, you can and you look at the workers, you can see who lives closest, and then you can kind of reassign them. So we're showing you enough information for you to make decisions that you understand this will make my settlement more productive, and then as you make those decisions, you'll hopefully see in the statistics and the overall numbers like number go up. If you see the number go up, you realize that you're doing a good job. And the people will tell you as well. They won't yet, but like some of the things they will complain about now is if they don't have any food, if they're going back home and they don't have any food. If they do that too many times, they will start complaining, because then their energy won't last as long, and you'll notice the productivity dip. So kind of some of it is nudging you a bit, so we can make some decisions for you and make it as optimal as possible. But there has to be an element of game to it as well. You have to make some decisions, and we don't want you to. It's a conscious decision. We don't want you to be able to lose the game. Like you can certainly, well, kind of, but we try and not make you stuck. So okay. So you can certainly mess up. So you can definitely run out of planks. You can run out of basic resources. Yeah. You can run out of So you can certainly mess up. But we try and not make it so that I mean, you almost intentionally have to do it. Like you almost intentionally have to not be aware of what's going on. And even so, like if you're running out of a resource, destroying a building that's used that resource before, it'll give you back some of the resources, so you can always kind of try and get back on track. But you can certainly mess up if you forget to place fire stations or you just ignore that warning. Your settlement will burn down, so you can lose. And in the future, when we're adding other elements of like we're talking about adding, and it's all optional because we still want to make the relaxing bit the main part, but we want to add things like thieves or raiders or quests where something from the outside will influence your settlement, and you'll have to make a decision based on what's the best outcome for my settlement. Like there will be different kinds of quests and things happening in the world that will make it more dynamic and challenging. But like when we're playing, take me and my brother for instance, we're very different when it comes to things we like to focus on in the settlement building bit. I like to kind of expand dynamically, and he likes to kind of carefully plan out his entire settlement with the roads and everything. He's got quarters planned, and there's going to be stonecutters over there, and 2 hours from now I'm going to expand into that area. And it's like he's super organized. And then there's the third brother who kind of he'll play for an hour and then he wants a disaster to happen. Mm-hmm. And I hate disasters. I really don't like something I don't have any control over coming in and ruining my city. But he likes disasters. Like so, it's an interesting mix of, I mean, just between the three of us. We like to play this kind of game very differently. So I think finding the way to please all three of us will make it more likely that we're pleasing a large amount of external players as well.
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. But okay, so that actually so obviously three brothers, obviously with three different perspectives. So
Yeah.
walk me through then how exactly you guys have like, okay, I have a single like game mechanic that I want for this experience that we want for the players. How exactly do you guys communicate between all three of each other? Be like, I want this, but then your other brother says like, hey, I want this, and then your third brother's like, nah, let's do something else. How exactly do you guys communicate like on that one mechanic, or, like that one gameplay experience that you want players to have? But like, there's like three different ways to go about it. How do you guys like exactly talk about and go over that?
Yep. So we obviously communicate like Discord and real life, and we talk and we chat and we kind of play together a lot. So that's kind of the basis of how we communicate. And then we'll often play either our game and think of something that like, oh, this will make the game more fun, and then I'll explain why I think it will make the game more fun, and the two other brothers, they will either agree immediately or they'll be like, oh yeah, but what if this happens, then how will your game mechanic react to that? And then I'll have to kind of explain how that will interfere with something else, or how it'll make the game better or worse. And then we'll kind of discuss that until we get to an agreement, and then we'll either agree that it'll be an improvement, or we'll agree that it'll probably not fit, or we'll put it on the backlog and revisit it later and see if it fits better when we have more content or when something changes. Okay. So we'll kind of challenge each other when we're describing features and game mechanics, like how will it work? Like, how do you see this working together with this? How will players understand it? How will you make sure it doesn't ruin something else? And it's worked very well so far. And then we're also lucky that we all like the same kind of genres, and we all take inspiration from the same games, and we have a similar understanding of what we like from those games. So we're lucky that we kind of want to have almost the same things from those games. So so far hasn't been that many different opinions. So it's been working out. So
cool. All right.
And another thing we like as well is watching other players play the game, and so many times we're picking up like small clues, and like the thing that you noticed with not being able to assign water to the market. Mm-hmm. Like you could have played that for 10 more minutes. I don't know if you had been able to find it out, but say you had been able to find it out, we would still have made a note of that. Even if I didn't tell you, we are still making notes. Whenever we play, we watch other streamers or gamers play our game, we're constantly making notes. Where are they getting stuck? What are the things they're kind of unsure about? So that's super interesting as well, and that influences the game a lot. Watching other players play the game.
Yeah. I mean, player feedback is always super important because it's the experience. It's like, how do a variety of people with all these different backgrounds approach our crafted experience as like game designers? Okay, so then what's been like the most interesting like session that you've watched when it comes to when you've watched someone else play? What's like the most interesting in like any regard? Is it like, oh my gosh, or it's like, I couldn't even think of this our game being played in this manner?
Yeah, that happens a lot, and then like just watching players, now we have arrows with the roads, like telling you where the roads are entering and exiting a building. And the reason for that is because we noticed a lot of players plopped down buildings facing towards a tree. And then to us that made it made total sense that the road will tell you, because you need to have roads connected to the building, and we've already explained that to you. It didn't make sense to us that players could be confused about that, but so many players were.
Really?
So then we added arrows for the buildings, like telling you when the building is connected to the road, or where it's supposed to be connected to the road. And then we felt, okay, we've done a good job. And watching players play that after we've added the arrows, they still managed to mess it up. They still placed buildings without being able to connect them to roads. So then we they'd place it next to another building because they thought it'll work. And then we made it so that the arrows turn green when they are connected to the road or can be connected to the road, and the entire building. You can't place the building if you've blocked the entrance.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's simple things like that. That's it's always interesting to watch because we've played the game so many times, and we've played similar games so many times, so we kind of have an expectation of how the game is supposed to work. But so many players doesn't. They have no idea how some of these games work, and we have to tell them, and we have to make sure their experience isn't ruined just because they placed a woodcutter in front of a tree. Because to them, that makes sense. But to us, obviously, it didn't.
You ever get tired of playing your own game? Do you ever get tired of playing your own game?
Sorry, and you lagged there for a bit.
Oh. My internet went out. Yeah, am I still here? Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good.
So that's one thing.
Yeah.
Do you want me to take another example, or did you want to ask another question?
I mean, do you ever get tired of playing your own game?
I get tired of making it sometimes when there's a lot of other things happening, and we kind of get tired of iterating over it, even though we see that it's getting better all the time. It can be tiresome to kind of go through the same thing, go through the same repeating. You have to do this, then you have to do that, and kind of it gets a bit tiresome at times. But then it passes, and it's back to being fun again. And it's always nice to just fire up a game session with the brothers and just use that as a relaxing backdrop for just hanging out.
There you go.
So it's yeah.
That's nice. That's very nice. That's really cool, actually. Yeah. Well, to future listeners, this is recorded live every Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. I'm here with Daniel. And chat. If you guys want to ask Daniel some questions, feel free to ask your questions. Otherwise, I'm going to keep on continuing on with my questions about Folklands. So, with all of this in mind, what are your next steps going forward, like to create this relaxing experience for players? And what should players expect more of that we saw today?
What you saw today was kind of the very, very basics of the game. It was like it's the earliest part and the earliest tiers and the earliest buildings, but we're adding more and more production chain buildings. We're making it so you can make your own tools. You can kind of expand your farming, and you can expand the things that you make. So kind of we want there to be enough content for you to enjoy one play session for several hours. Like, we want you to want to expand into the entire map, but there has to be enough content, because with woodcutters and sawmills, there's not enough content to keep you happy for more than half an hour. So obviously that's just the beginning, but we're adding things like breweries. You have to make farms. You have to gather raw materials and turn those into ingots, and you have to turn those into tools or coins. And then we also have like this whole social need thing. So you as you expand your settlement and your folks grow into new tiers, they have more and more needs. So they'll want to hang out at a tavern, and the tavern needs to be stocked with meat and beer. And then as they get more sophisticated, the tavern isn't interesting anymore, and then they want like a theater or nice clothes or jewelry, and you have to kind of expand your production to cover all those needs. So that's kind of on the content side of it. And we have several of these things planned, and we have to get to a point where it makes sense to release a game. So for the demo, there's more than enough content for a demo. It highlights the game and it shows what the game is about. And for an early access release, there has to be some kind of content, like this is a full game experience, even though we want to add more stuff to it later.
Yeah. So all right. So you mentioned breweries, and part of the thing is that like you have to manage your supply lines. And it sounds like you guys got a lot planned up. But as like game designers, we're always combating like scope creep. Like with my own projects, I'm like, oh my gosh, like I could implement this mechanic and this interaction. Like, oh no, that is actually super complicated. So I want to, for people who don't know what scope creep is like when you keep on adding and adding all of these mechanics, which means that there's more development time, and which means more money, and which is something that you can't afford. When it comes into game development. So like if I have like $100 I need that $100, scope creep is like, oh, that $20 thing in our $100 budget, we're making it $25 because we're expanding the scope of it, and then eventually your budget's blown out to $150, if that makes sense. So I want to ask you, Daniel, how exactly are you guys regulating scope creep with Folklands?
One of the things we did from the very beginning was that we're focusing on making what's called a vertical slice. So,
what exactly is a vertical slice for?
A vertical slice. That's a full game experience, but for something very limited. So you'll have the entire world. You have everything, but there's only so much of it that's made, but all of that is completed. So you have the world generation. Like we wanted this game to be possible to play multiplayer, even though it's a single player experience in the beginning. From the very earliest builds that we had, multiplayer was working with the stuff that we wanted to make. If that wasn't the case, then that would be something that we needed to add later, and it would kind of it would add a technical difficulty for us later. So we focused on making the very, very minimum things work with multiplayer. That's one of the ways we managed to get that in early. Maybe your internet dropped out again.
No, I'm still here.
Okay, sorry. And then for the things we made, we thought about how can we make this reusable. Like the woodcutter, for instance, it's a building that gathers resources, and then there can be many different resources. So the same logic that is used for the woodcutter, that's also used for the berry gatherer. It's also used for the well. It's also used for the stonecutter, and that makes it so that it's fairly trivial to add new resources and new buildings to the game without having to make a new game mechanic or develop new things. Like if we want to add a new resource to the game, it's almost only making the building, like rendering the building, making it in Blender and kind of getting that out. It's making the resource, like what is it called, how does it work, and then it's just okay. Then that's a building, that's a new mechanic, that's a new resource. So everything that we've made it so that it's always reusable. there's nothing in the game that's kind of hard coded to the thing that it is. So a production building is a production building, and it's the same logic that happens whether it's producing planks or it's producing meat or it's producing beer or it's producing. So to us that's made it easy to very quickly add new stuff and take stuff in or out. And it's the same for the fire station and the tax collector and the builder's hut as well. They're service buildings. They have a specific service they want to cover. They're dependent on one specific resource. But you can expand that a lot by just making it very generic. And then that makes it easy to play with scope. And because we can play with it so quickly, it's easy to kind of limit it and have it working.
Yeah, that's actually excellent scope. It's part of that's actually a really good scope regulation method. So like with this,
it's been working well for us at least.
Yeah, it sounds like it works absolutely well. So like to like the uninitiated like people, I know what you're exactly what you're doing, but maybe like explain like what the nuances of it, like what goes into that method that you just described.
Of making it generic.
Well, yeah, making it generic essentially.
Yeah, it's hard. I think it's a bit hard to explain. It's when you're developing, you have to think of if I ever mention the word woodcutter in the code, it's probably not generic. If that makes sense. If I ever mention a specific resource or building or structure, then I'm not making it generic. If I'm referencing something like a production building, if everything I do is centered around a generic thing, I don't know. It's a bit hard to explain, but it's about just taking a step back and figuring out if this is reusable or not.
Yeah.
If I were to change this, how can I switch this from wood to stone? Exactly. For instance, how can I take this and make sure that it doesn't care what goes in and what goes out? It just cares that it knows what it's supposed to coming in, what it's supposed to come in, and what is supposed to go out, and what's the process, what's the kind of ratios. So you make everything reusable and non-specific, but at the same time you make sure it works.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Maybe okay. So maybe to help out here is like, say I have fruits. I have like an abstract. I have a category of fruits, and they're defined as like properties between like shape, color, and sweetness level. That's like the three properties, and like then there's like some interactions that are all shared with them. It's like, hey, like I have for like an apple, for like a fruit, you bite into it and you chew into it. That's like how you interact with it. You bite it and you reduce the volume of it. And then that's like shared between all the fruits, but then you make like a banana and like an apple and like an orange. They all have their own unique interactions, like peeling or scraping away or cleaning off. So essentially using that, like, do you want to, how does that exactly apply to your resources then? Like that with the fruit.
Yeah, it's similar to that with the resources. We categorize the resources into either raw material, or they are food. If they are food, they have a certain energy level, or they belong to a certain category. They're either drinkable or eatable, or I can't remember the third one. But it's and we categorize it, and we make, like you said, we make certain properties that are shared among everything in the same category, and then it's easy to just add another thing to the category and just tell it where does it come from, how is it used, and kind of what category does it fit into, and then it's easy to add more variations to. Like, we have farms, they can grow wheat, but they could also grow barley, they could grow rice. you don't have to make different features or different functionality for those three. You can just make three different resources and just call them three different things, and then suddenly you have 3 times the number of farms in the game. So it's thinking like that from the beginning that makes it reusable.
Yeah, and then I also noticed that you guys immediately you mentioned multiplayer.
Yeah.
So do you want to perhaps like talk about like the importance of like defining the scope and how it shapes a whole entire project from the get-go, and like how like it actually may make implementing new stuff really difficult at times, or wherever you want to take it, dude.
Yeah. A multiplayer is hard. It's no matter if you add it from the beginning, it's always hard. But we've I don't know. We've focused whenever we're adding features, we always have multiplayer in mind. How will this work with different players? Like, and how can, like, take something like trading. We've made a trading post in the game, so you can have a trading post and you can set up, I want to sell these things from my trading post, and then other players in the game, they will immediately see what you have for sale, and they can send their traders over to your settlement and buy those things, and then suddenly you get money and they have to part with money, and they have to plan, or you have to plan to be able to sell things to make money, because that's going to be the main income source going forward without the tax collector. You have to make things that can be sold. So figuring out how this works is, I don't know. I think I forgot your question.
It was in like the importance of like defining the scope from the get-go of a project, so that. Do you want to talk about your experiences with defining that scope from the start of Folklands?
I don't think we ever defined the scope for multiplayer. We want it all to work in multiplayer, and we've made sure it always does. And
defining it from the start.
Yeah, that's probably how that went. So it's been something we wanted to have in from the beginning. So we put it in the beginning, and then we've kind of built it from that. And then we always have. We have regular play sessions where we test out the features that we've made and how it works. And then, like the thing you saw with the borders, we have exploration towers that you can build to expand your territory. And then when we played that, we realized, okay, that's interesting, but can we make it so that we can add some interaction? So we added explorers, like the folks. They can be explorers when they're employed in the exploration tower, and then they can either go survey areas. That's a thing we picked from settlers, where to figure out whether there's iron or coal or gold or diamonds, you have to send out explorers or geologists in settlers, but we're calling them all explorers, and then they have to investigate the different areas, and then they'll tell you what's in that area, and then you can build either a coal mine or an iron mine or something. So that's one thing that we do from exploration towers. And then you have you can set an area that you want to occupy, and you can tell your explorers to go occupy that area. So they kind of expand your borders gradually towards that area, and then you can expand your territory like that, and that kind of adds a bit of interaction between players.
Yeah.
And then we'll make it so that when your buildings are kind of, they will define your borders. So if you expand into an area that isn't covered by a tower, it will be easy to take that area for someone else if they build a building that kind of occupies that area. So it's that's one of the ways multiplayer has influenced how we develop a game feature. But it's
nice. Well, all right. As we are approaching the end of our interview, one, thank you very much. But two, I want to ask you, like, what is the most fun thing about game design for you? Ultimately, it's about having fun at the end of the day. But what's the most fun for you?
The most fun is made things and made mechanics, and then you have an idea of how they work, and then you make them, and then you forget that there is code driving everything, and you forget that you've written all this functionality, and you just sit there and then you enjoy the game being about the thing that it's supposed to be about. It's about people walking around. One example is a long time ago, the people in the game, they were walking to their jobs and back, and they were walking to their houses, but then it kind of felt a bit lifeless. So we added this bit of random interaction where if the people don't have anything to do, like if they're unoccupied or if they're at home, kind of enjoying themselves at home, they will seek out either other people or they will seek out interesting places nearby, and they will walk to that point and either start chatting with people or they will kind of look at things. And it just, I wrote that code. I know it's totally random. I know there is no logic. There's no group interaction. But after that was implemented in the game, suddenly, like you could have crowds of people just standing in an area and looking like they were talking to each other, and it felt alive, even though I knew it was totally random. But that little change, it just, when you see that happening, that's a super rewarding experience. Going from code to
people just
feeling that it's a world
that people can get immerse themselves in.
Yeah.
I've definitely felt that when I was playing through the demo. It was very nice.
I'm glad you liked it.
Yeah.
Even if it's limited.
Hey, if it's a good vertical slice, that means you got the core loop down, you got the core, the feeling and all that stuff. Just keep on building that. You're good.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, Daniel, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it, man. But I want to ask you, where can people find you?
We are at Folklands Game on Twitter, or X, or whatever it's called this week. And obviously, if you search for Folklands on Steam, you can find us. And we have tons of links everywhere. So if you find us either on Steam, Folklands, or Twitter, Folklands Game, then you can find everything about us.
Yeah. Awesome. Is there anything else you want to tell folks about about Folklands or anything like that? Anything exciting? Any announcements or anything like that?
If you like the game, wishlist it. That's the best way to help us. If you've played the game and you have feedback, tell us. We love hearing from players who play the game and want to they get ideas or they have feedback. Just tell us. We love it. That's probably what I want.
Regardless
we do.
Of where it's coming from.
Correct.
So yeah, I mean that's a whole entire discussion in of itself.
Yeah, it is.
But otherwise, I think we need to call it a wraps here. I could talk for hours, but I know you've got to go. Regardless,
I do.
Thank you very much for your time, Daniel, and thank you very much for allowing me to play Folklands.
Thank you so much for having me and enjoying the game.
Yeah. Otherwise, we will see you around, Daniel.
Thank you very much for watching this episode of The Magic of Games. If you enjoyed it, make sure to drop a like and subscribe, and maybe even a follow on our Twitch channel, linked down below. Otherwise, I will see you all next week with the Sand Knight. Take care.